I'll never forget the look on my dad's face that night. We were all gathered in the living room, the whole family crammed together, because it was his birthday. There was cake on the table, half-melted candles, dripping wax onto the frosting. But nobody was smiling. The laughter that usually carried through birthdays was absent, replaced by a heaviness I could feel pressing against my chest. Dad leaned forward in his chair, the weight of his stare drilling into me, and with a voice that sounded like it had been building for weeks, maybe months, he asked the question that shattered the room apart. $300,000. What did you do with it? The world tilted. I froze. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate, the sound echoing like a gunshot. 300,000. I repeated, my voice trembling. What are you talking about? I searched his face for a sign that maybe he was joking, that maybe this was one of his cryptic lessons about responsibility or money. But no, his eyes were hard, searching, almost accusing. Before I could even process the meaning of those words, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. My sister, Clara, shifted in her seat. Her face, usually painted with that smug, unshakable smile, went pale. And in that instant my stomach sank. Something was very, very wrong. Dad didn't blink. Don't play dumb with me, Maya. The money's gone. The transfers came from your name. I want to know what you did. I felt the blood drain from my face. My name? My accounts? I had no idea what he was talking about. I could barely scrape together my rent, let alone handle hundreds of thousands of dollars. I didn't take anything, I whispered, shaking my head. Dad, I swear. But the words lodged in my throat. My hands shook against the table. Across from me, Clara kept her gaze fixed on her lap. Her fingers twisted nervously, tugging at the edge of her sweater sleeve. It was the first crack I'd seen in her perfect facade. For years, Clara had been the golden one, the flawless daughter, the one Mom doted on, the one teacher's praise, the one Dad defended no matter what. She always had the last word, always had the sympathy. I was the shadow, the afterthought, the one who had to work twice as hard just to be noticed. So why now? Why was she pale? Why was she avoiding my eyes if I was the one accused? Dad, you're wrong, I finally said, my voice trembling but rising. I don't even know how to access that kind of money. Where would I even put it? His hand slammed against the table, rattling the plates. Then explain why the withdrawals trace back to your name. Tell me why your signature is on the papers. My heart stopped. My signature? Papers? I couldn't breathe. I turned sharply toward Clara. She flinched, just for a second, but it was enough. She knew something. Dad, my words faltered. I didn't do this. My eyes locked on Clara, and my voice hardened. But I think I know who did. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like she'd been caught mid-lie. Maya, don't you dare, she hissed under her breath, but Dad heard nothing. His attention was still pinned to me, waiting for answers I didn't have. The air in the room was suffocating. The cake sat untouched, the candles burning down to stubs, as though mocking the idea that this was supposed to be a celebration. And in that moment, one thought clawed the back of my mind. If I had known, then what Clara had done, I might have left the house that night and never come back. Because what she set in motion wasn't just theft. It was betrayal. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just break a family, it destroys it. And it was only the beginning. I grew up the youngest daughter in a family that loved appearances more than honesty. My sister, Clara, was 2 years older than me, and she was the golden child from day one. Straight A's, perfect hair, perfect smile. Every aunt and uncle doted on her, like she was some kind of princess. At family gatherings, relatives would gush about her grades, her charm, her potential. And me? I was the other daughter. The afterthought. I worked just as hard, sometimes harder, but it never seemed to matter. If Clara got a 90, I had to get a 95 just to be noticed. Even then, the spotlight always slid right back to her. I remember once winning a regional essay competition. My teacher pulled me aside and said it was one of the best entries she'd ever read. I came home, heart bursting, ready to share the news. Dad barely looked up from his paper. "That's good, Maya," he said flatly, before turning to Clara to ask about her cheerleading practice. I never mentioned it again. The favoritism wasn't just subtle. It was loud, constant, undeniable. At school events, Dad and Mom would beam at Clara, clapping until their hands were sore. When it came time for my achievements, they'd nod politely as though checking off a box. And when it came to discipline, Clara could do no wrong. I once came home 10 minutes late from curfew and was grounded for a week. Clara stumbled in hours past midnight smelling of vodka, and Mom giggled, saying she's just young, having fun. I learned to bite my tongue. I learned that fairness was a myth in our house. But still, deep inside, I kept hoping that one day they'd see me. By 16, I decided I couldn't rely on them. I got my first part-time job at a cafe, scrubbing dishes until my hands ached. Clara mocked me for it. "Why bother?" she laughed one night, tossing her glossy hair over her shoulder. "Dad and Mom will take care of us." Her words stung, but I didn't let them break me. I wanted independence. I wanted to know that when the world turned against me, and it often did, I'd have my own back. So I saved every penny. I skipped parties. I lived frugally. I dreamed about college, about maybe even starting my own business one day, about proving to myself that I didn't need to be anyone's golden child. Meanwhile, Clara burned through money like it was infinite. She spent her allowance on designer handbags she didn't need, trendy clothes she wore once, and nights out with her wealthy friends. If she ran short, Mom slipped her extra cash, sometimes straight out of Dad's wallet. No one questioned her. No one told her no. I should have seen it then, the difference between us. The way greed had already taken root in her heart. Still, I never imagined her carelessness, her hunger for more, would spiral into something so destructive. There were warning signs, times when little things went missing. A pair of earrings I swore I hadn't lost. A mysterious withdrawal from my savings account that the bank said I must have made, even though I hadn't. I brushed it all off, telling myself I was being paranoid, telling myself Clara might be careless, but she wasn't cruel. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. But the truth? The truth was creeping closer with every careless smirk on her face, with every time Dad looked past me to praise her. And by the time the storm finally broke, it was already too late to stop it. The warning signs were there, but none of us saw the storm coming. It started small. I was 19, and for once in my life, I thought I finally had something that was just mine. My professor had pulled me aside after class, his voice brimming with excitement, and told me about a prestigious scholarship I should apply for. It wasn't just a couple $1,000s. It was life-changing. Full tuition, living expenses, and even connections with companies that recruited directly from the program. I remember walking home that day with my chest swelling, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe this was it. Maybe I didn't have to keep being the afterthought in my family, the shadow behind Clara's golden glow. I could carve something for myself on my own merit. So I locked myself in my room for weeks. I poured everything I had into that essay, draft after draft, night after night. My eyes ached, my fingers cramped, but I refused to give up. I wasn't just writing an essay. I was building my escape, one carefully chosen word at a time. I dreamed of opening that acceptance letter and, for once, being the one everyone looked at with pride. The day I submitted it, I felt like I had given the world my soul on paper. A few weeks later, the results were due to be announced. I was nervous, but deep down I was hopeful. When I came home that evening, Clara was sprawled across the living room couch, her glossy hair shining under the light, her nails perfectly painted. She looked up at me with that infuriating, knowing smile. "I hope you're not too disappointed," she said. I frowned. Disappointed about what? She shrugged as if it were nothing. "The scholarship. Don't take it too hard. It was a long shot for you anyway." Her words made my stomach twist. I hadn't told her the results were coming out that week. In fact, I hadn't told her anything about the scholarship beyond a vague mention months earlier. How did she know? I pushed the thought aside, clinging to hope. Maybe she was bluffing. Maybe she just wanted to rattle me, like she always did. But then came the moment that shattered everything. A few days later, one of the senior faculty members stopped me in the hallway. He clapped a hand on my shoulder and smiled warmly. "Congratulations on helping Clara with her application. It's no wonder she won, with a sister like you behind her." The hallway seemed to spin. "What?" I croaked, but he was already walking away. My chest went cold. My vision blurred. I knew then. Somehow she had taken it. She had stolen my essay, put her name on it, and sent it in as if it were hers. That night, I stormed into her room. She was perched on her bed, painting her nails like she didn't have a care in the world. "You stole my essay," I whispered. My voice was trembling, but I forced the words out. She didn't even flinch. She blew lightly on her nails and smirked. "Don't be dramatic. We're family. What's mine is yours." My blood boiled. "No, that's not what you meant. What's mine is always yours." "But what's yours?" "Untouchable." Her smirk deepened. "Finally, you're catching on." I wanted to scream, to drag her downstairs and tell Mom and Dad, to finally expose her for what she really was. But I already knew how it would end. Clara would widen her eyes, let her voice tremble, maybe even let a fake tear roll down her cheek. And they'd look at me, their younger daughter, and shake their heads. "Why are you jealous of your sister? Why are you trying to tear her down?" So I swallowed it. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, something inside me shifted. It was the first time I realized Clara wasn't just selfish. She wasn't careless. She was calculated, cruel, and she had no problem stepping over me to climb higher. I thought that was the lowest she could go. And just when I thought she couldn't sink lower, she did. By the time I turned 21, Clara was practically running the house. Dad adored her. Mom defended her every choice. And me? I was the backup daughter, the afterthought. I can't tell you how many times I'd walk into a room and hear, "Clara this, Clara that," as if her name was the only word worth repeating in our family. She had just landed an internship at some big marketing firm through one of Dad's business friends. She strutted around the house in heels she couldn't even walk in properly, tossing her hair and bragging about how networking is everything. I wanted to laugh sometimes. She didn't earn it. She didn't even apply properly. Someone handed her the opportunity, the same way everything else had always been handed to her. But no one cared. To Dad, she was ambitious. To Mom, she was a shining star. I'd watch her charm Dad into signing checks for things she needed. New clothes for work. A down payment for an apartment she barely stayed in. A brand new car she didn't even know how to drive because she couldn't handle stick shift. Meanwhile, I was dragging myself through double shifts at a cafe just to cover my student loans, my clothes smelling of burnt espresso, my feet blistered, my body aching. One evening, we all sat at the dinner table. Dad was in a good mood, swirling his wine. Clara leaned across the table, her face glowing with that smug confidence she wore like perfume. "Daddy, you wouldn't believe what Maya told me today," she began sweetly. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told her anything. She said, "She feels guilty. You're always helping me." Isn't that silly? She should be proud of me, not jealous. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. My cheeks burned hot. "I never said that," I blurted out. Clara gasped dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "Maya, how could you say that in front of Dad? Now he'll think I'm a liar." Her voice cracked just enough to sound wounded, her eyes wide and glistening with manufactured hurt. And just like that, the tables flipped. I was the jealous, bitter sister. She was the innocent victim. Dad's face hardened as he set his glass down. "Maya, enough. Stop dragging your sister down just because she's succeeding. Why can't you just be happy for her? The words sliced through me like knives. I opened my mouth, desperate to defend myself, but the sharp look in Dad's eyes told me it didn't matter. Nothing I said would change his mind. Clara's word was gospel. Mine was nothing. I sat there in silence, the humiliation crawling up my throat, threatening to choke me. Clara turned away from me with a triumphant little smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She didn't even need to say it. The message was clear. She had won again. But it wasn't just my parents. That was the part that gutted me. It was everywhere. When I told my boss I couldn't pick up extra shifts because of finals, she muttered, "I thought you were responsible like your sister." When I tried to explain to friends how hard I was working, someone always reminded me how Clara has it together. Why don't you just follow her example? I was drowning in her shadow, and the world was convinced I had put myself there. That night, I locked myself in my room and tried to hold it together. I wanted to scream into my pillow, to rip apart the walls with my bare hands. Instead, I sat in silence, my nails digging into my palms until they left crescent marks. I thought I had seen the worst of her cruelty, her lies, her manipulations, the way she twisted my words into daggers. But then came the dinner where she revealed her true intentions. And that was when everything changed. Not long after, I got a call that felt like a miracle. It was a gray morning, one of those days when the sky seemed to press down on you, heavy and endless. I had just finished my shift at the cafe, my apron still dusted with flour, when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another bill collector or a spam call, but something made me swipe to answer. "Hello, is this Maya?" The voice on the other end was warm, professional. It was my professor from the university. "Yes, this is Maya," I said, my voice tight with exhaustion. "I wanted to let you know that I've recommended you for a research assistant position here on campus. It's steady hours, good pay, and I think it would be a fantastic fit for your skills. They'll reach out soon, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. Congratulations, Maya. You deserve this." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my throat burned, and my eyes stung with tears I didn't want to shed in the middle of a crowded bus stop. After everything, the late nights, the constant humiliation, the way Clara overshadowed me at every turn, someone finally saw me. I clutched the phone to my chest, barely able to whisper, "Thank you." That night, I rushed home, practically glowing with anticipation. I didn't expect much. At best, maybe a nod of indifference from my parents. But I wanted to share it anyway. Clara was already in the kitchen, lounging on a stool with a glass of wine like she owned the place. Mom fluttered around her, fussing over some detail of her outfit. I ignored them, focusing on Dad. "Dad," I said, breathless, "my professor recommended me for a research assistant position at the university. It's a big opportunity, steady pay, real career experience." For the briefest moment, there was silence. Clara's glass paused midair. Mom frowned slightly, as though unsure how to respond. But then Dad's eyes softened. He actually smiled. He stood, walked over to me, and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Maya. Really." Those words. So simple, but they hit me harder than anything I'd heard in years. My throat tightened, and I had to look down so no one would see the tears threatening to spill. I don't think Dad realized what he had just given me. A crack of light in a house that had been nothing but shadow for me. A shred of validation I had been starving for since childhood. That night, lying in bed, I let myself imagine a different future. Working hard, saving money, and maybe, just maybe, finally getting my own apartment. Somewhere far from Clara's poisonous shadow. Somewhere I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating in her lies. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. I closed my eyes and let the vision carry me away. Me, independent, thriving, no longer the forgotten daughter. I could see it so clearly, like it was already within reach. But fragile things don't last in Clara's world. Because the very next week, Clara ripped that hope out from under me. I walked into the cafe one afternoon, ready for my shift, my bag still slung over my shoulder, when my manager pulled me aside. His face was tense, the kind of look you only see before bad news. "Maya, we need to talk." My stomach dropped instantly. The words no worker ever wants to hear. I glanced at the schedule board behind him, half expecting to see my name scratched off already. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I can't keep you on the schedule." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. What? Why? Did I do something wrong? My voice cracked, betraying the panic that clawed at my throat. He shook his head, quickly. No, it's not your work. You're great, Maya. You're one of the best." But he hesitated, his eyes sliding away from mine. "Someone called the university. Said you're unreliable, that you've stolen money from past jobs. They didn't want the bad reputation, so," he let out a breath, "the assistant position went to someone else." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. "That's not true. Who would say that?" The pity in his eyes was unbearable. "Doesn't matter. Damage is done. I can't keep you here either. The owner doesn't want trouble." The cafe around me blurred, the clinking cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the smell of burnt coffee grounds. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. My dream, my chance at freedom, ripped away by a shadow I couldn't even see. I stumbled out into the street, my chest tight, my vision swimming. Each step home felt like walking through quicksand, dragging me deeper into despair. By the time I reached the house, I was numb. My hands trembled as I pushed the door open. And there she was, Clara. She sat in the living room like a queen on her throne, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of wine balanced in her manicured hand. The golden glow from the chandelier bathed her in light, as though the universe itself favored her. She looked up at me, her lips curving into that smirk I knew too well. "Oh, poor Maya," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Lost your little job already?" I froze in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. "Don't worry," she continued, swirling the wine lazily. "Daddy will always take care of us." "Well," she tilted her head, her eyes glinting with cruel delight, "me at least." Her smirk widened, and in that moment everything clicked. The mysterious call, the perfect timing, the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. It was Clara. She had sabotaged me. I stood there, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. 1,000 memories flashed through my mind: the stolen scholarship essay, the whispered lies at dinner, the way she had always turned the world against me with a single look. And now this, my chance at freedom, ripped away not by fate, but by her deliberate hand. My throat tightened, rage burning hotter than I had ever felt before. I wanted to scream, to hurl the truth into the room, to wipe that smug smile off her face. But my voice wouldn't come. The words stuck in my chest, heavy and choking. She took a slow sip of wine, her eyes never leaving mine. "Cheer up, Maya," she said softly. "You'll find something else. Something smaller. Something that suits you better." Her words sliced through me like knives. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every betrayal replayed in my mind like a cruel film strip. The scholarship, the lies, the stolen opportunities, and now, the dream job she had stolen before it even began. The rage in me grew hotter, sharper, until it was no longer just pain. One thought burned through me, searing every nerve, every vein, every fragile piece of hope I had left. Enough was enough. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows of the room shifting with every passing hour. My chest rose and fell, heavy and uneven, like I was suffocating under the weight of years of silence. Every cruel word Clara had ever said echoed in my head. Every smirk she flashed when she got away with something. Every time Dad's eyes lit up for her and dimmed for me. The scholarship, the job, the endless little digs, the humiliation. My chest ached, but it wasn't sadness anymore. It was rage, a molten heat that crawled into every corner of me, burning away the last scraps of hope I had clung to. I whispered into the dark, my voice so low it almost startled me. Enough! I sat up, the sheets falling from my shoulders, and reached for my journal, the battered one I usually used for class notes and ideas. But that night, it wasn't for notes. It wasn't for venting. It was for war. I flipped to a blank page and started writing. Not poetry, not diary entries. Plans. Cold, sharp, unflinching. I listed every weakness Clara had, every lie she told, every time she slipped up and thought no one noticed. I wrote down the people she used, the favors she owed, the tricks she pulled when she thought she was clever. And as the ink filled the page, something inside me shifted. The more I wrote, the calmer I felt. My breathing steadied, my shoulders loosened. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't drowning. Clara thought she was invincible because Dad always covered for her, because Mom defended her, because everyone around her believed the polished mask she wore. But masks crack. And what if, just what if, the truth came out? What if Clara's little kingdom of lies collapsed in front of the very people she needed the most? What if she had to face her reflection without the power of manipulation to shield her? I gripped the pen tighter, pressing until my knuckles ached. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't immortal. She was just careful, calculated, cunning. And I could be too. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gray, my journal wasn't filled with words anymore. It was filled with blueprints, a map of destruction, the framework of a plan that had a heartbeat. I sat back, exhausted yet buzzing with adrenaline, staring at the pages that now looked less like paper and more like destiny. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not the polite, brittle smile I used when I was forced to sit through Clara's victories. Not the weak curve of my lips when I wanted to cry but couldn't let anyone see. This smile was sharper, stronger, alive. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back. But even as the first rays of sunlight cut across my room, illuminating the journal pages in a golden glow, I didn't realize the path I had just stepped onto. Because revenge doesn't stay clean. It doesn't follow the rules you set in your head. It takes you down roads darker than you can imagine, twisting and reshaping you until you hardly recognize the person staring back in the mirror. I thought I was just writing a plan, but what I was really writing was my descent. And I didn't know then that the plan would take me down a much darker road than I ever expected. Revenge couldn't happen overnight. Not with someone as manipulative, as calculating as Clara. I had to be careful, patient. One wrong move, and she'd twist it back on me like she always did, and I'd be the one left looking guilty. So I started small. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I crept into Dad's office. His desk was always cluttered, papers stacked in uneven towers, old envelopes shoved into drawers, sticky notes with half-legible reminders. He wasn't careless, but he trusted us too much. He thought we were family, and family didn't need locks. I began with the obvious: bills, receipts, old letters. I wasn't looking for anything specific at first, just patterns, inconsistencies. Anything that would explain how Clara always had money for things she shouldn't have been able to afford. The bags, the clothes, the trips she posted online with her fake captions about studying abroad. For days, I found nothing but the usual: utility bills, credit card statements, boring tax forms. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And then, one afternoon, my fingers brushed across an envelope tucked between two old binders. Inside was a bank statement in Dad's name. At first, I almost put it back. It looked like the dozens of others I'd seen. But then my eyes froze on the numbers. Large withdrawals. Not hundreds. Not thousands. Hundreds of thousands. My throat went dry as I traced the lines, the little memos written next to each transfer. Clara tuition. Clara rent. Clara expenses. Except Clara had never paid for tuition. She dropped out of college her second year, claiming the professors didn't understand her creativity. Rent. She was still living at home, her room stuffed with clothes and handbags. Expenses? What kind of expenses cost this much? My hand shook as I pieced it together. Dad had been giving her money, a lot of money, but Clara hadn't been using it for what she told him. The air felt thin, my chest tightening as the truth sank in. Where had it gone? That night I couldn't sit still. I watched Clara parade around the living room in her silk robe, sipping wine and laughing at some show. She didn't look like someone worried about debt or stress. She looked smug, comfortable, secure, and that made me even more certain. The next day I made my move. I asked to borrow her laptop, pretending I needed it for a group project. She barely glanced at me before waving it over, too arrogant to think I'd ever snoop. Clara never logged out of her accounts. She thought she was untouchable, and she was right until now. I opened her email first. Shopping confirmations flooded the inbox. Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Dior. Thousands spent in a single night, over and over. Then I checked her banking app. Transfers, transactions, withdrawals. My stomach lurched as I scrolled further. Luxury vacations, hotel bookings under aliases, weekend getaways in places she'd never told the family about. All on Dad's money. And then, like a knife to the chest, I saw the total. 300,000. Gone. My pulse hammered in my ears. I gripped the sides of the laptop so tightly my knuckles ached. She hadn't just stolen opportunities from me. She hadn't just sabotaged my future. She drained our family dry, all while smiling sweetly at Dad and pretending she was the perfect daughter. The rage inside me boiled, but underneath it was something sharper. A clarity, evidence. For the first time, I had something concrete. Proof of who she really was. I could see the endgame now. If I played this right, Clara's mask would shatter in front of everyone. Her lies would unravel. And when Dad saw the truth, when Mom could no longer defend her, when the entire family realized what she'd done, it would destroy her. My hand hovered over the trackpad, ready to screenshot everything, to send it all to myself, to secure it before she could ever cover her tracks. But just as I started copying the files, the door creaked. I snapped my head up. Clara stood there, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. Not furious, not panicked, but calculating, almost amused. "What are you doing on my laptop, Maya?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet, the kind of sweetness that always hid poison. My heart pounded so loudly I thought she might hear it. I scrambled for an excuse, but her smirk widened before I could speak. She knew, and in that moment I realized something chilling. I wasn't the only one planning. Clara had secrets she hadn't even begun to play yet. I thought I finally had everything I needed to bring her down, but betrayal has a way of cutting deeper when it comes from someone you trust. I couldn't keep this to myself. Not anymore. The evidence was too big, too damning, too dangerous to leave sitting in the back of my mind like a ticking bomb. But I knew I couldn't go straight to Dad. Not yet. He'd never believe me without the right setup, without undeniable proof presented the right way. And if I rushed it, Clara would just twist everything like she always did. So I turned to the one person I thought I could trust, my cousin Lily. Lily had always been my safe place at family gatherings. When Clara soaked up attention in the living room, Lily and I would sneak out to the porch, whispering secrets, mocking Clara's fake laugh, her smug way of flipping her hair. She saw through her. She always had. If anyone would understand, if anyone would have my back, it would be Lily. We met up at a quiet coffee shop near campus, one where Clara never went. My hands trembled as I slid the envelope across the table. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots. Every damning detail I had collected. Lily flipped through the papers slowly, her brows pulling tighter with each page. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wide. Maya, this is huge. She's been bleeding your dad dry. 300,000? This isn't just selfish. It's criminal. Relief washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this war. I know, I whispered, leaning closer, and I need to stop her. But I can't just throw this in Dad's face. You know how he is. He'll defend her, find some way to excuse it, or worse. He'll think I'm exaggerating. I need to build this carefully. If I confront her too soon, she'll twist it all, and I'll be the jealous one again. Lily nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. You're right. You need strategy. You need timing. If you pull this off the right way, Clara won't be able to talk her way out of it. Her words comforted me. For the first time, I felt like someone saw the storm I'd been trapped in. But even as we talked, I noticed it. A flicker in her expression. Something guarded in her tone. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself she was just shocked by the weight of what I'd shown her. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that something wasn't right. I silenced it, because I needed her. 2 days later, my world collapsed. Dad called me into his office. His voice was clipped, his expression sharp in a way I hadn't seen before. When I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. He was holding the very papers I had shown Lily, the evidence I had gathered so carefully, the proof I had trusted her with. Maya. His tone was hard. Where did you get this? My throat closed. I was looking through some of Clara's files. I needed to understand where the money was going. Clara says you stole her private information. His eyes bored into me. She says you're jealous of her success, that you're fabricating stories to turn me against her. The room tilted. My chest squeezed so tightly I couldn't breathe. No, Dad, that's not true. She's lying. Please, you have to see that. But his face was unreadable, carved in stone. He didn't soften the way he had when Clara batted her eyelashes. He didn't reach for me, didn't even blink. She swore to me this was another one of your jealous schemes, he said. And given how you've been acting lately, his voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken disappointment. My heart cracked. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was blind, that Clara had him wrapped around her little finger. But all I could think about was Lily's face in that cafe, the way her eyes had lingered a little too long on the documents, the way her voice had trembled when she said, "This is huge." I'd trusted her. I'd put my entire plan in her hands, and she had delivered it straight to Clara. I stumbled back, my knees threatening to give out. The betrayal burned hotter than any of Clara's cruelty. Clara was my enemy, I had always known that. But Lily? Lily was supposed to be my ally, my sister in everything but blood. And now, because of her, Clara wasn't just protected. She was armed with proof of my desperation. My father's silence was worse than shouting, worse than punishment. It told me one thing. He believed her. He believed Clara. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I thought Clara was my biggest enemy, but I had underestimated how far her web of lies reached. Clara thought she had won. After Dad confronted me, she walked past my bedroom that night with a smug smile plastered across her face. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She just leaned against my doorframe, her voice low, sharp and poisonous. "Nice try, Maya," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "You'll never beat me." Her laugh echoed down the hall as she walked away, every click of her heels like a gavel slamming down a sentence. Guilty. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something against the wall, to run downstairs and force Dad to listen to me, to shake him until his blindfold finally slipped. But instead I stayed frozen. My chest heaved, my fists trembled, but my mouth stayed shut. Because the truth was clear. If Clara wanted a war, she'd get one, but not on her terms, on mine. That night, as I lay in the dark, the humiliation burned hot in my chest. But underneath the fire, something steadier was growing. A cold, hard determination. That confrontation with Dad had shifted everything for me. It wasn't about winning his approval anymore. It wasn't about proving I wasn't jealous or desperate or weak. It wasn't about him at all. It was about Clara. Revenge wasn't going to come from making Dad believe me. He was too far gone, too wrapped in her lies. No, my victory would come from exposing her so thoroughly, so undeniably that no one, not Dad, not Mom, not even the neighbors who adored her fake charm, could deny who she really was. She had built her little kingdom of lies, brick by brick. I would smash it with her still standing inside. So I got smarter. I stopped confronting her directly. No more screaming matches that ended with me looking unhinged and Clara pretending to cry on Dad's shoulder. No more throwing accusations into the air for her to swat down with fake innocence. Instead, I watched, listened, waited. I started small, quietly gathering. Every time she left her laptop unattended, I slid in like a shadow. Every email, every receipt, every screenshot, I took it all. I scrolled through endless chains of messages where she bragged to her friends about scamming Daddy again and laughed about how gullible he was. I saved them, time-stamped and organized. Then there were the photos. She thought she was clever, posting carefully cropped shots on Instagram with captions about charity work or grinding late nights at the firm. But I knew the truth. One post in particular sealed it. A selfie at a 5-star resort in Cancun. Sunglasses, cocktail in hand, infinity pool behind her. The problem? That same day, she had texted Dad telling him she was exhausted from volunteering at a children's hospital. I saved the picture. Every lie became another weapon in my arsenal. But I didn't stop there. I dug deeper. I pulled records from old family files, tracing the withdrawals Dad had made over the years. Clara's fake tuition bills, the fake apartment deposits, the absurd consulting fees she had invented. Each one was a nail in her coffin. And as I pieced it all together, I realized something I hadn't before. Clara wasn't just greedy. She was reckless. She thought she was untouchable, so she had never bothered to cover her tracks. She left a trail of arrogance in every text, every email, every photo. And I was following it straight to her destruction. Weeks passed, and I kept my mask in place. Around her, I acted smaller, quieter. I let her think she'd broken me, that I was fading into the background like the jealous little sister she always painted me as. But inside, I was sharpening my blade. I spent nights building files, categorizing proof, preparing a case so airtight that not even Clara's crocodile tears could save her. I didn't just want revenge anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted to crush her carefully constructed image until all that was left was the raw, ugly truth. Still, patience was the hardest part. Every time I saw her laughing at dinner, every time Dad slid another check across the table, every time Mom beamed with pride at her hard work, the urge to expose her right then and there almost consumed me. But I bit my tongue, because the stage wasn't set yet. Then came the shift. One evening, Clara floated into the dining room, bragging about some charity gala she had been invited to as a guest of honor. She talked about rubbing elbows with donors, about how proud Dad would be when she secured connections that could help the whole family. I nearly laughed out loud, because I already knew the truth. She wasn't going to a charity gala. She was going on another lavish trip with her friends, the kind of trip that left a digital paper trail, the kind of lie I could expose in real time. As she smiled across the table, her eyes glinting with smugness, I knew. This was it. The perfect opportunity was falling right into my hands. The timing, the proof, the audience. It was all coming together. And when the moment arrived, when she slipped up and showed the world who she really was, I'd be ready. I wasn't just planning revenge anymore. I was preparing the performance of her life. And she didn't even know she was the star of the show. But what I didn't realize as I sharpened every blade in secret was that this plan of mine would drag me into a darker, messier battlefield than I had ever imagined. Because Clara wasn't the only one playing games. And when the perfect opportunity finally arrived, I knew it was time to strike. The perfect opportunity came in the form of Clara's birthday party. She had begged, manipulated, and wheedled her way into convincing Dad to rent out a lavish banquet hall in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung like icy crowns above the room. Round tables draped in silk cloths shimmered under the light, and platters of catered food gleamed with excess. There was even a professional photographer walking around, snapping pictures of Clara as if she were some kind of celebrity. Of course, it was all paid for by Dad. But what Clara didn't know, what no one in that glittering hall knew, was that this party would also be the stage for her downfall. I had spent days preparing. Every night after everyone went to bed, I worked quietly at my desk, sliding files into place. Every screenshot, every receipt, every smug email she had ever written, neatly organized into folders. I compressed them into a slideshow, timed perfectly, each slide hitting harder than the last. Dates, amounts, hotels, flights, lies, lined up like bullets in a gun. I even bought a small, sleek flash drive, one tiny piece of metal, holding everything I needed to burn down Clara's kingdom of lies. The hardest part wasn't gathering the proof. It wasn't even building the presentation. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. For days leading up to the party, I had to smile at Clara's ridiculous outfits as she tried on dress after dress, twirling in front of the mirror like she was auditioning for a pageant. I had to nod when she asked if I thought her hair should be curled or straight, knowing she didn't actually care about my opinion. I had to watch her prance around the house, rehearsing her fake, grateful little speech. Dripping with charm, she didn't mean. Every laugh I gave was hollow. Every smile was forced. But I played the part, because I knew my role wasn't to fight her before the show. It was to let her take the stage. And I would be the one to cut the lights. On the night of the party, I put on my nicest dress. Not extravagant, not flashy, just simple, elegant. Something that wouldn't draw too much attention until I wanted it to. I slipped the flash drive into a slim clutch and zipped it shut, feeling the weight of it like a heartbeat against my palm. When I walked into the banquet hall, I had to pause. The scale of it stunned me. Hundreds of guests mingling in polished shoes and glittering jewelry. Waiters gliding between tables with trays of champagne. Music floating through the air. And at the center of it all, Clara. She floated through the room like a queen. Her sequined dress catching the light with every step. Her smile perfectly practiced. Her laugh rehearsed to sound genuine, but not too loud. People adored her. They clapped her on the back, kissed her cheeks, gushed about her beauty and success. I stood near the edge of the crowd watching. Not a single nerve in me trembled. Not a single hand shook. Because I knew what was coming. I watched Dad beam with pride as he followed her around like a bodyguard. I watched Mom fuss over her hair, making sure no strand was out of place. I watched our relatives and family friends shower her with compliments, piling her ego even higher. And all the while I kept my mask on, calm, quiet, waiting. The photographer snapped away, capturing every fake smile, every hollow hug, every lie Clara told with her lips curled in glittering confidence. It was almost poetic. Then came the moment. The music quieted, the lights dimmed just slightly, and Clara stepped onto the small stage set up near the front of the hall, a glass of champagne in her hand, her sequined dress sparkling under the spotlight. She looked like the perfect star of the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing clear and sweet, dripping with false humility. "I just want to say thank you to my wonderful parents who have always believed in me, to my friends who support me endlessly, and to everyone here tonight for making me feel like the luckiest girl alive." She paused, letting the room erupt in applause. I felt the flash drive heavy in my clutch. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. Clara raised her glass, her smile wide, her eyes glinting with pride and ownership. "And now," she said, her voice bright with triumph, Let's toast to the future, to success, to family, and to dreams that come true when you work hard enough for them. She tilted her glass back, ready to drink, and that was when I stood up. The room hushed almost instantly. I could feel every pair of eyes swing toward me, confused, surprised. I could feel Clara's smile freeze on her face, her glass still lifted midair. My hand tightened around the clutch. The truth sat in my palm, ready to shatter her carefully built illusion. And I didn't tremble. Not this time. Because the moment I had been waiting for was finally here. And as Clara lowered her glass, blinking at me with that familiar mix of disdain and fear, I took a step forward, with the truth in my hand. The clinking of glasses echoed through the hall as Clara tapped a spoon against her champagne flute. Her sequined dress shimmered beneath the lights, her smile blinding, her voice dripping with sugary perfection. "To my amazing family," she began, scanning the crowd with practiced warmth, "and especially to my father, who has always supported me in everything I do. I wouldn't be where I am today without you." Applause broke out instantly. Dad raised his glass, his chest swelling with pride, while Mom dabbed the corner of her eye as though Clara's words were some heartfelt confession of love instead of a rehearsed performance. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack, because I knew the truth. The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly, so perfectly polished, that anyone who didn't know better might have believed her. Almost. But I did know better. I rose slowly from my chair. My knees brushed the tablecloth, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. And yet my voice, when I spoke, was steady. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the sound to cut through the laughter and applause, "there's something you all deserve to know about Clara." The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. Glasses lowered. Forks paused midair. Clara froze, her smile faltering, her champagne flute trembling just slightly in her hand. Dad frowned, confusion furrowing his brow. "Maya," he said cautiously, "what are you doing?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out the flash drive. The small piece of metal seemed to glint in the chandelier's light, as though it were a dagger. I turned toward the projector set up in the corner of the room. "Just showing the truth," I said. A few whispers ran through the crowd. Dad shifted uncomfortably, but Clara laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "Maya," she cooed, "you're embarrassing yourself." But then the first slide appeared on the big screen. A crisp image of a bank transfer. $20,000 wired directly to Clara. The room went still. Before Clara could speak, the next slide flashed. A receipt for 3 luxury handbags, each costing more than most people's rent. Another slide. Hotel bookings in Clara's name, thousands of dollars spent on weekends at 5-star resorts. And then the kicker, a photo she herself had posted online. Clara on a sun-soaked balcony, champagne in hand, the caption, "Another day, funded by Daddy." Gasps erupted across the hall. Whispers rippled like wildfire, spreading from table to table. Faces turned, eyes narrowed, jaws dropped. Clara's face drained of color. She shook her head, laughing nervously. No, those are fake. She's lying. You all know Maya's jealous of me. She's always been jealous." But the slideshow didn't stop. Page after page, transaction after transaction, stacked neatly like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb over. $50,000, $100,000, $300,000 in total. Every dollar accounted for, every life stripped bare. And then the final slide. Clara, posing in front of a gleaming luxury car, her hand on the hood, her sunglasses reflecting the city lights. The caption, "Daddy's wallet never runs dry." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the faint hum of the projector, the clink of someone setting down a forgotten glass, the shallow sound of Clara's breathing. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. This isn't real," she whispered, her voice trembling now, no longer rehearsed. But the crowd didn't believe her. Eyes that once adored her now stared with disgust. Guests who had laughed at her jokes and clapped at her stories now whispered about her greed, her deceit, her betrayal. And Dad, looked like he had been struck across the face. His jaw was rigid, his hands clenched into fists, his eyes locked on the screen with a kind of wounded fury I had never seen in him before. Clara reached for him, desperation flooding her face. Daddy, please, it's not what it looks like. But he recoiled. For the first time in her life, he didn't believe her. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. The spotlight that had always burned me now scorched her. Her world, her carefully crafted illusion, was unraveling. But as I stood there, my chest heaving, the whispers growing louder, I realized something chilling. This wasn't the end. No, this was only the beginning of her nightmare. The banquet hall was dead silent after the last slide faded. The projector's hum filled the silence like a warning, a low growl vibrating in the background. All eyes were locked on Clara, pale, trembling, cornered. I thought for one wild second that it was over, that the evidence had done its job and her empire of lies had finally collapsed. But Clara wasn't done. She never went down quietly. In a move so fast, so calculated, it almost stunned me, she let out a broken sob. Her body crumpled into the chair, her shoulders shaking as tears poured down her face. Big, dramatic sobs that echoed across the marble floor, bouncing off the chandeliers as though she were on stage performing a tragedy. She clutched her chest like I had driven a knife through her. How? How could you do this to me, Maya? She wailed, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. The room gasped in unison. Heads turned. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some eyes flickered to me, wide, questioning. You're jealous. Clara shrieked, her voice cracking at just the right pitch. You've always been jealous of me. And now. She gestured wildly at the screen where her own face was still frozen mid-smirk in front of that car. Now you're trying to destroy me with these lies. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I could feel the atmosphere tilting, sliding out of my control. The evidence had been undeniable, yet the sympathy in the room was shifting like sand. I froze. Wait, were they actually believing her? Clara pressed her hands against her face, shaking her head, sobbing harder. She hacked my accounts. That's the only explanation. She's obsessed with me, always watching, always following. She probably doctored those files because she can't stand that Dad loves me more. Murmurs swelled in the air, whispers turning into low conversations. A few guests, neighbors, family friends actually nodded. I caught one of them whispering, "That's extreme, hacking your own sister." My chest tightened, each breath harder than the last. The slideshow still blazed behind me like a spotlight, but suddenly it wasn't evidence anymore. It was being twisted into proof of obsession, proof of madness, and Clara was feeding them every word. "She's sick," Clara hissed, pointing a shaking, trembling finger at me. Her wet eyes burned with venom even as her lips quivered with practiced fragility. "She needs help. Everyone here knows it. Tell them, Maya. Tell them what you did." The room pulsed with tension. Dad sat frozen at the head of the table, his hand pressed against his forehead. His silence was worse than yelling. His silence told me he didn't know what to believe. I stood there, my palms damp, my throat dry. For a moment, just a moment, I felt cornered. Like I had stepped into her trap without even realizing it. Like the truth I had bled to uncover was slipping through my fingers. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to scream the reality back into their ears, but before I could, the sharp scrape of a chair echoed through the hall. Every head turned, and there, slowly rising from her seat, was Mom. Her face was pale but unreadable, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the back of her chair. She didn't look at Clara, not at first. She didn't look at me either. She looked at Dad, And then, finally, her eyes cut across the room, locking onto mine. Her lips parted, and in that frozen heartbeat, I realized whose side she had chosen. Mom's chair scraped back hard against the floor as she stood, her face pale, but her eyes blazing like fire. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look at me with doubt or with pain. No, her glare was sharp enough to cut me open where I stood. "That's enough, Maya," she snapped, her voice slicing through the tension in the hall like a whip. Every head turned toward her. My chest tightened. I already knew what was coming, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. Her fingers shook as she pointed it straight at me. "How dare you humiliate your sister like this? On her birthday, no less." The room rippled with murmurs, guests leaning into one another, whispers crawling across the tables like poison. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Mom, the evidence is right there. You saw it." "I saw nothing but bitterness and cruelty," she cut me off sharply. Her voice rose, strong and unwavering. "You've always resented Clara. Always. From the time you were little. You couldn't stand that she shined brighter than you." The words hit me harder than any slap could have. My chest burned, and for a moment I thought my knees might buckle. Even with the truth plastered on a screen behind me, dates, numbers, receipts, my own mother was choosing her golden child without hesitation. Gasps and mutters rolled through the guests. Some faces looked uneasy, shifting in their chairs, but others, neighbors, Dad's friends, Mom's cousins, nodded at her scolding. To them, maybe this was easier to believe. The jealous younger sister, lashing out. The proof, nothing more than fabricated spite. And Clara hid her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with loud, racking sobs. It was a performance worthy of an actress. Every cry perfectly timed. She let her voice tremble as she whimpered, "She's just trying to ruin me, Mommy." And look, she almost succeeded. That cracked sob broke whatever doubt some of the guests still had. Sympathy softened their faces as they looked at her, pity dripping from their eyes. Mom rushed forward, kneeling beside her, wrapping an arm around her trembling body like she was shielding her from a storm. She stroked Clara's hair, glaring up at me with disgust sharp enough to make me flinch. "Jealousy is an ugly thing, Maya," she said bitterly. "And tonight, you've proven just how ugly it can get. You should be ashamed of yourself." I couldn't breathe. The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling, my chest tight with betrayal, so deep it hollowed me out. Even after everything I'd gathered, even after stripping Clara bare with evidence no one could deny, Mom still chose her. I scanned the room, heads shaking, guests whispering, a few glaring at me like I'd spit on the floor of the banquet hall. I was losing them. Clara was winning again. My legs trembled, my fingers cold and useless. For the first time since I'd started this fight, I felt the crushing weight of defeat pressing down on me. For a split second, I thought it was all over, that I'd miscalculated, that this was Clara's victory after all. And then I saw Dad. He wasn't holding Clara. He wasn't glaring at me. He wasn't even looking at Mom. He just sat there, silent. His knuckles were white where his fists clenched against the table. His face was unreadable, stone, carved with tension, his eyes fixed on something distant. I realized in that moment that he wasn't convinced. Not yet. There was still a battle left to fight. And when he finally spoke, the entire room leaned in. Dad rose slowly from his chair, the scrape of the wood against the polished floor echoing in the banquet hall. Every guest froze, every whisper choked off mid-breath. The only sound that remained was the faint hum of the projector still frozen on Clara's Instagram post. Her smirking in front of that car, the caption mocking every sacrifice Dad had ever made. "Enough," he said, his voice low. But it carried. It cut through the tension like a blade, silencing the entire room. My chest tightened. My eyes locked on his face, desperate for any sign, any flicker of belief in me. He looked at me first, and I swore I saw something in his eyes, doubt, fear, maybe even guilt. Then his gaze shifted to Clara. Finally, he looked at the frozen projection behind her, the image of her bragging about Daddy's wallet in front of strangers. Maya, his voice was heavy, tired, almost breaking. These files, this evidence, it's a lot to take in. But I raised you both. I know my daughters. My pulse quickened. Please, Dad. Please, not now. Don't let her win. He turned toward Clara, his jaw tight. And I want to believe you, Clara. I really do. But before he could finish, Clara rushed to him, clutching his arm like a child clinging to a parent's hand in a storm. Her voice cracked in practiced desperation. Daddy, please, don't listen to her. She's been trying to turn you against me for years. You know how jealous she gets, how she hates when people love me. She must have hacked those accounts, doctored those files. You know I'd never steal from you. Never. Her crocodile tears slid down her cheeks, staining her makeup, but her grip on his arm was firm, controlling. She pressed her head against him, trembling like the very image of innocence. Dad closed his eyes, his jaw flexing like he was holding back something. Anger, grief, maybe both. The silence stretched so long I thought my ribs might crack from the weight of it. My heart hammered so loudly it felt like the entire hall could hear it. Finally, he let out a long, weary breath. His voice was strained when he spoke. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said at last, shaking his head. It's her word against yours. And until I have proof, I can't condemn my own daughter. The words landed like a death sentence. My stomach dropped. My knees weakened, the world tilting around me. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand how the proof wasn't already enough. But my voice was gone. Clara seized the moment, as she always did. She buried her face into Dad's chest, her words carefully loud enough for every guest to hear. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered, trembling with false relief. I knew you'd never believe such lies. I knew you'd protect me. Her voice was syrupy, broken, designed to paint me as a monster. And unbelievably, people clapped. A few hesitant at first, then others joining in, the sound filling the room like nails in a coffin. Neighbors smiled with pity at Clara. Mom's relatives nodded approvingly, whispering about family loyalty. The projector screen behind them still glowed with evidence of her theft, her arrogance, her deceit, but it was drowned out by applause, by Clara's tears, by Mom's proud hand rubbing her back. I stood there hollow, empty, my hands cold, my body trembling, my hope crumbling into dust. After everything I'd collected, every sleepless night, every detail of Clara's lies laid bare, it still wasn't enough. Clara turned her head just enough for me to see her smirk through the curtain of crocodile tears. It was fleeting, hidden from the crowd, but it pierced me like a blade. She knew she'd won again. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Rage coiled in my chest, but beneath it was something heavier, despair. Was this how it would end? Had I come this far, only to lose everything in front of everyone? The room buzzed with voices again, as if the matter had been decided. The tension dissolved into awkward chatter, the clinking of glasses, Clara basking in her victory while Mom whispered reassurances in her ear. And then, actually, a voice cut through the room. Strong, steady, unshaken. The noise died instantly. Heads turned. Mine snapped toward the doorway. And there he was, Dad's banker, the man I had begged, pleaded, and finally convinced to come. Standing tall, his suit sharp, his expression serious as he surveyed the scene. He held a slim leather briefcase at his side, his presence commanding the kind of respect Clara's fake tears never could. I can settle this once and for all, he said, his tone like iron. My breath caught. The walls of despair around me cracked open, because in that instant I knew the tide had turned. The banker walked in with a folder tucked neatly under his arm, and just like that, the entire hall froze. The clinking glasses, the whispers, even Clara's exaggerated sobs. All of it cut off like someone had pressed pause on reality. Every head turned. Every eye followed him as he stepped into the light of the chandeliers. "Mr. Williams," he said firmly, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. His eyes were locked on Dad, calm but unyielding. "I was asked by Maya to attend tonight, and I think you'll want to see this." He laid the folder down on the table with a sharp thud that seemed to reverberate in my chest. My breath hitched. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. This was it, the moment I had fought so hard for. The banker opened the folder and pulled out a stack of crisp documents, sliding them toward Dad. Official statements, seals, logos, Clara's name printed over and over, each page like a nail in her coffin. Transfers, withdrawals, even her careless signatures sprawled in black ink, undeniable and permanent. "It's true," he said, his tone flat but powerful. "Every dollar of the $300,000 went directly through Clara's accounts. These records are bank certified. They cannot be fabricated." The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled across the room. Neighbors covered their mouths. Family members exchanged wide-eyed glances. Some guests who had clapped for Clara moments earlier now turned their heads toward her, their expressions hardening, suspicion carving itself into their faces. The whispering spread like wildfire. I felt my lungs fill for the first time in what felt like hours. Vindication burned in my veins. The evidence was no longer just mine. It was undeniable, stamped official. Dad's face went pale. He stared down at the papers, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through each page. His eyes darted from the documents to Clara, then back again. Disbelief etched every line of his face, as if he was watching his world shatter piece by piece. "No!" Clara's voice was a strangled whisper, her body rigid as she stumbled back a step. Her eyes were wide, glistening with fear, but behind them I saw the calculation already churning. "No, this isn't right. This isn't real." Her denial was weak, brittle, her mask cracking under the weight of proof too heavy to bear. But the banker didn't flinch. He tapped the corner of one of the statements with a deliberate finger. "These are direct from the bank. If anyone doubts their authenticity, they're welcome to contact me personally. I will verify every number, every transaction, every signature." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the chandeliers seemed to buzz louder. The walls of Clara's perfect world were collapsing brick by brick. The money, the lies, the charade, all exposed in black and white. For the first time that night, I saw her mask falter completely. Her breathing was shallow, her hand shaking, her eyes darting around the room as though searching for someone, anyone to save her. But then her lips curved, not into a smile, not quite, but into something sharper, a flicker of defiance, the gleam of a predator cornered but not yet finished. Because Clara never surrendered. Not easily, not without claws. She straightened slowly, her sobs vanishing as if they had never been real, her trembling stilled, and in their place was a cold, venomous calm. "That's cute," she hissed, her voice suddenly clear, sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "Really cute, Maya. You dragged a banker into my birthday party. You showed them some papers with my name on them. Congratulations." She turned toward the crowd, raising her voice, her tears gone, her eyes blazing now with dangerous determination. "But let me tell you all something. Maya is obsessed with me. She has been for years. She watches me, stalks me, twists everything I do. So, of course, she'd find a way to make this look like my fault." The room shifted uneasily. Guests who had been glaring at her now glanced back at me, their uncertainty rekindled. Clara had cracked, but she wasn't finished. She was turning the blade around, aiming it at me with everything she had left. Dad's mouth opened, but no words came out. He was caught between the damning truth on the table and the venomous daughter clutching at straws. And I knew in that instant that Clara wasn't done fighting, because when her back was against the wall, That's when she was the most dangerous. And that was when Clara tried her dirtiest trick yet. Clara's sobs grew higher, piercing, frantic, the sound of a cornered animal. She staggered forward and dropped to her knees, right at Dad's feet, clutching the hem of his jacket like a child. "Daddy, please!" she cried, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her trembling fingers shot out, pointing at me, then at the banker. "You know Maya's been obsessed with ruining me. What if she paid him to lie?" Her voice cracked as she whipped her head around to the guests. She could have blackmailed him, threatened his family. You don't know what she's capable of. Gasps broke across the hall like glass shattering. A few heads turned toward me, eyes narrowing, suspicion worming back into their faces. Clara's words didn't carry the same power they once had, but she had done what she always did best. She planted a seed of doubt, and then she pushed it further. Her chest heaved violently, her breaths turning sharp and shallow. She clutched at her heart with one trembling hand, staggering backward like she'd been struck by lightning. I can't," she choked out, stumbling. Her knees buckled. Her body collapsed against the polished floor of the banquet hall. A woman near the front gasped, "Oh my God, she's having a panic attack." Instant chaos. Two guests rushed forward, crouching beside her, trying to fan her, soothe her. Another called out for water. "See? Look what you're doing to her." Mom screamed, her face red with fury as she spun on me. "Your jealousy is literally killing your sister." The crowd rippled with pity. I could see it in their eyes, that familiar softness, the dangerous sympathy Clara always knew how to summon with a well-timed tear. Even after all the evidence, after the banker's cold, factual words, people were wavering, falling back under her spell. And worst of all, Dad hesitated. I saw his body twitch forward, his hand twitching at his side like he was seconds away from kneeling down and gathering her into his arms, ready to save her all over again. Clara saw it too. From the floor, she reached upward with trembling fingers, her wide, wet eyes locked on him like he was her only lifeline. "Please, Daddy," she whispered weakly, her voice barely audible, yet somehow slicing through the tension like a blade. "Don't let her take you away from me." It was a performance worthy of an award, and it was working. I could feel the room tipping, the pity, the doubt, the whispers. If I didn't act now, everything I had built would collapse. My blood boiled in my veins, but beneath the rage, there was something sharper, calm. Purpose. Because I had been saving something for this exact moment. The one thing Clara could never lie her way out of. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled my phone from my clutch. My hands didn't shake. My eyes locked on Clara as I unlocked the screen, scrolled to the file I had hidden and pressed play. The speakers picked up immediately, filling the hall with the unmistakable sound of Clara's voice. Her laugh. Cold, smug, unfiltered. "Honestly, Daddy's such an idiot. I just tell him I need tuition money, and he hands it over. Like, what does he think? I'm at Harvard? Please. I dropped out years ago. But who cares? His wallet never runs dry." The hall went deathly still. Clara's body froze on the floor. Her fake sobs caught in her throat. Her wide eyes snapped toward me in horror, but it was too late. Because her own voice, her own words, were echoing through the hall, damning her more completely than any document or slideshow ever could. Gasps rose like a storm. People's faces twisted, shock bleeding into disgust. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Another hissed, "So it's true." Clara scrambled to her knees, shaking her head violently. No, that's not me. That's edited. She edited it. She's crazy, she." But before she could finish, the recording played again. Another clip, her voice dripping with arrogance. I could drain him dry, and he'd still thank me for being such a good daughter. Dad's body jerked like the words had struck him physically. He staggered back, his face ashen, his hand gripping the back of a chair like he needed it to stay upright. Clara lunged forward on her knees, reaching for him. Desperation etched across her face. "Daddy, please. She's lying. You know me. You know I'd never." But her own voice interrupted again, crueler than ever, sealing her fate. "Maya's pathetic. She thinks she can compete with me? Please. She'll always be nothing. Daddy knows it. That's why I'll always win." And in that moment, her mask shattered completely. Her tricks, her tears, her panic attack, all of it burned to ashes in the face of the one thing she couldn't twist, couldn't deny, couldn't erase. Her own voice. And as the sound of her laughter replayed across the hall, I knew the game was over. But I also knew Clara well enough to understand one terrifying truth. When she had nothing left to lose, that's when she was at her most dangerous. And she wasn't finished yet. The hall fell into a silence so sharp it pressed against my chest like a weight. My phone's speaker crackled, and then Clara's own voice, smug, drunk, unfiltered, filled the air. "Honestly, it's hilarious how easy Dad is. I just smile, cry a little, and boom, another transfer. Maya could never pull this off. She's too dumb. Daddy will always choose me." The words hung in the air like poison. A ripple of shock surged through the guests. Gasps echoed, whispers erupted. People turned their heads as though they needed to confirm with their neighbors that they'd really heard what they thought they had. I watched Mom's face drain of color. She looked like the floor had been ripped from under her feet. And Dad, his hand froze in midair, just inches from Clara's trembling fingers. His eyes widened, pupils dark, like his brain couldn't process the daughter he thought he knew. But the recording wasn't finished. It rolled on, cruel, merciless, as if the walls themselves were intent on exposing Clara for what she truly was. By the time he notices the money's gone, I'll be long gone too. And Maya? She'll be the perfect scapegoat. She's already pathetic enough for everyone to believe it. The explosion that followed was immediate. The crowd erupted into chaos. "No way," someone whispered. "Oh my God," another hissed. "I knew something was off with her," a guest muttered bitterly. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others shouted openly. Clara's kingdom, the fragile illusion she had spun for years, crumbled in real time. Her performance collapsed with it. No more shrill sobs, no collapsing to the floor, no trembling hand reaching for salvation. Just shock. Pure, icy shock carved into her face. She stared at me like I had stabbed her in the back. But it wasn't me. It was her own voice, her own arrogance, her own undoing. Dad slowly pulled his hand back, his face ashen. He looked at her as though she had turned into a stranger right in front of him. His lips trembled as he whispered, almost to himself, Is this really who you are?" Clara scrambled up from the floor, wild and desperate, mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint. "No, that's edited. She faked that, I swear." But her words didn't matter anymore. Not this time. The guests weren't fooled. They turned away, whispering angrily. Friends who used to cheer her on now looked at her like she was filth. The banker crossed his arms, his face grim, nodding as though justice had finally been served. For the first time in her life, Clara had no control, no audience, no sympathy, no allies. Dad's voice cut through the storm like a blade. "Get out," he said. Low, sharp final. Clara froze. Her lips parted, trembling. "Daddy." "I said get out." His roar echoed off the marble walls, rattling the chandeliers. The hall went deadly still. Clara stumbled backward, her glossy heels clattering against the floor as though even the ground didn't want to hold her anymore. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for one friendly face, 1 ounce of pity, one person willing to reach for her. But there was nothing. No one. She turned, mascara-streaked and broken, and fled. Her heels clicked against the marble as she ran, her shoulders shaking with sobs, her crown of lies slipping, crumbling. The heavy doors slammed behind her with a thunder that shook me to my bones. And just like that, Clara was gone. The girl who always won. The sister who always shone brighter. The daughter who always had the upper hand. I stood there, breathless, my chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon. My hands tingled, my blood roared, but there was something else, too. Emptiness. It was over. The war I had been fighting for so long. The endless cycle of humiliation, of being overshadowed, of screaming the truth into deaf ears. Clara was finished. Exposed. Shattered. But as the guests began murmuring, as Mom clutched her face in horror, as Dad stood frozen in place, broken and pale, a chill slid down my spine. Because something inside me whispered that this wasn't the end. And I was right. What happened afterward, I never expected. The party ended not with music, not with laughter, but with a silence so thick it clung to every corner of the hall. No more champagne clinking, no more forced smiles. Just stunned faces, pale whispers, and the shuffle of feet as guests slipped out one by one, their heads bent together, already carrying the scandal into the night. I could almost hear it spreading, like wildfire leaping from dry grass, through town, through social circles, through every place Clara had once strutted like a queen. I stood in the middle of it all, motionless, the echoes of Clara's downfall still vibrating in my chest. And then I looked at Dad. He was sitting at the long table, his shoulders heavy, his hands slack at his sides. His eyes stared not at me, not at the banker's papers, not at the phone that had shattered Clara's lies. They stared at nothing. For the first time in my life, my father, the man who had always seemed invincible, untouchable, iron-willed, looked old. I took a step toward him. My heels clicked against the marble, the sound harsh in the hollow silence. He didn't move, didn't look up, and when his voice finally broke the quiet, it wasn't the booming authority I grew up with. It was cracked, fragile, almost ashamed. "I failed you, Maya," he whispered. "I should have seen through her. I should have protected you." The words tore through me. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as the lesser daughter, they hung between us like ghosts. My throat tightened, my chest aching. I wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse into his arms. But instead, I swallowed the pain, forcing my voice to steady. "You don't need to apologize, Dad," I said softly. "You just need to see me now. Really see me." And then, slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no doubt clouding them. No favoritism. No blind devotion to Clara. Just me. His daughter. His real daughter. And in those tired, tear-glossed eyes I saw it, pride. It should have healed everything. It almost did. But then my gaze drifted past him, to Mom. She stood near the doorway, her purse clutched tight in her hands, her lips a thin, trembling line. Her eyes darted from me to the scattered documents on the table, then back to me again. And in that flicker I saw it, denial. She didn't say a word to me. Not one. As she turned to leave, her voice cracked in a mutter, just loud enough for those closest to hear. "Clara had just made a mistake. That's all. She's a good girl, she just made a mistake." Her words cut deeper than knives. She still chose Clara, even when the truth was splashed across the walls, even when Clara's own voice condemned her. Mom clung to the fantasy, because admitting it would mean admitting she had been wrong all along. And then she was gone, out the door, out of the conversation, out of my reach. But Clara's story didn't end in that hall. Word spread faster than I ever could have imagined. The friends who once lined up to bask in her glow dropped her without hesitation. The luxury car she had flaunted like a crown jewel was repossessed within weeks. The hotels and boutiques she used to strut through with borrowed money blacklisted her name. Invitations stopped arriving. Her phone, once buzzing with admiration, grew silent. The bridges she had built from lies and manipulation were gone, burned to ash by her own hand, and all that was left was her, alone, exposed, forgotten. But me? I wasn't celebrating. Not really, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something far bigger. It was about me reclaiming my life, my dignity, my voice. For so long, I had been the shadow, the overlooked, the other daughter. But not anymore. That night, I had finally ripped away the mask, exposed the rod underneath, and stood in the light. I wasn't the jealous little sister anymore. I was Maya, the girl who finally stood up, the girl who proved the truth, the girl who won. And yet, even now, when I lie awake at night replaying every word, every scream, every shattered expression, I can't help but wonder, did I go too far? Was exposing her like that in front of everyone justice or cruelty? Should I have walked away, let karma take its slow, quiet course, instead of striking the match myself? Sometimes the answer feels clear. Other times it gnaws at me. So I'll ask you, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did Clara deserve every second of it? If you love seeing bullies and manipulators finally get what's coming to them, hit that subscribe button. Because, trust me, the next story is even crazier.